Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
podcast for parents and families everywhere.
Whether you have kids that plan to attend college or you have current college students, you want them in and you want them to graduate.
You want a quality education that will give you a skill set that will make you marketable for the jobs of today and the jobs of tomorrow. I am Mark Stucker, and I'm a college coach from Metro Atlanta.
And I am Anika Madden, and I am a parent also from Atlanta, currently in North Carolina.
And I'm David Williams, and I'm a dad from Chicago, Illinois.
This week in the news, Williams College cuts tuition by 15% and cancels sports for the fall semester. Mark and Anika will discuss part 2 of how to get outside private scholarships. Our question from a listener is the strenuous process of getting into selective colleges really worth it? And our interview is the final part from Gil Villanueva on advice for under-resourced students when applying and enrolling in college. And our college spotlight is Carnegie Mellon University.
I'm excited about talking about Carnegie Mellon, and thanks to you, multiple people sent in a request for Carnegie Mellon. So we ask you to send in requests, and when you do it, we need to step up to the plate. So it's going to be a fun one. But for now, what a week. You know, we're going to talk about the Williams College article, but we had a little more time, would have done a breaking news and done an audible, because this is a bombshell, this story right out here right now. International students fighting for their financial life as the Trump administration is threatening to withhold visas for any online student. And of course, a lot of the colleges are having their international students be online. And just to put in perspective, what the size and scope of the international market is. There are 1 million international students in the country, 1/3 from China. They spend $45 billion directly to schools. Those are just school costs. They generate 450,000 jobs for the U.S. economy. So I'll be honest, this has Stephen Miller's fingerprints all over it, the anti-immigration, legal or illegal person inside the White House, and looking for excuses to decrease immigration and using COVID as an excuse. And so, this is something that more than likely we'll be coming back to next week for a deeper dive. Just want to follow it in the news and see where it goes. Yeah. But schools are pushing back, tremendous pushback right now. First, Harvard said that we will be filing a lawsuit. MIT joined, Northeastern joined. Dave and I are recording this a little earlier, Thursday, a week before it goes live. The UCs just announced this morning that they are filing their own lawsuit. And I'll just read a quote from Harvard's lawsuit, and then Dave, it sounds like you want to say something.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, here's a quote from the Harvard lawsuit, their statement they made. We will not stand by to see our international students' dreams extinguished by a deeply misguided order. We owe them to fight, and fight we will. Any comments, Dave?
Let me tell you the feedback that I'm getting from my friends in Canada and in Europe and in Australia. This administration is destroying our country's reputation abroad to the detriment of this country and to the benefit of all our neighbors. Canada's applications for international students are going through the roof. You know that. McGill, University of Toronto. The fact is that if you are Chinese or Asian, you have options. Harvard is not the only place to get educated. And I believe that this is going to be an inflection point where we see the decline in the stature and the desirability of U.S. institutions for others in Canada, Australia, and in China, India, and beyond. Microsoft already does the majority of its recruiting from the Indian Institute of Technology, and they have no problems opening up satellite recruiting offices in the heart of the educational institutions that we are now battling against with all this foreign policy. So I just can't emphasize how detrimental this is to our country and its long-term impact. Now, just one last thing to throw out there. I was shocked to find out 2 years ago that Toronto had surpassed Chicago in size. And if Toronto continues current growth trends, it'll be the second largest city in Canada and the United States in the next 20 years, surpassing even Los Angeles. Do you know why? Because all those immigrants that the United States refuses to bring into our country Canada stops up willingly, grows its economy, gets great tech industries, and while our major cities are shrinking, Canada is benefiting. So, I mean, that's my little tirade for the moment. Let's go on.
Dave, you know what? You're coming off a 12-hour shift, man. I'm not gonna be calling you low energy Jeb today, man. You're bringing the zest, bringing the heat, man, packing the heat.
Oh, well, this is such a ridiculous policy. Sometimes you just have to you just got to tell it like it is. It's stupid.
Yeah. Well, I will say something about this. I've tried really hard to not mention political things just because I know they can be divisive. But I've also tried to always be transparent and authentic with our audience. And I can't hide it anymore. What's happening in this administration, it really is adverse. I'll just stick within the educational context. It is having very adverse implications for education. And, and we'll just leave it at that as far as education. And then right now there's the threat to say we'll withhold funds if schools don't open, K-12 schools. Well, everybody wants schools to open if they're safe.
Right.
But safety's got to be first and foremost the concern. There's no extra resources being given to encourage and to follow the blueprint, the suggestions all the educators have, and the CDC about what can be done to ensure safety. So no resources are given. And then, these threats go out. So that's another big story because we have families in K through 12 schools.
Right.
And, and they, so that's another story worth tracking.
Well,
anyway.
And just one last
Get it off your chest, Dave. And I know we're going to come back to this next week because I know this story is not a 1-week story. It'll be alive again. But go ahead, say what you need to say.
While we are going through a second resurgence or we never got through the first wave, every other country has crushed this virus. You go to Canada, there are no cases or virtually none. Australia, China, Japan, most of Europe has been able to deal with this pandemic, do the social distancing measures necessary, crush it, build their economy, and move on. Only the United States has cases that rival. The only other competition we have in our dysfunctionality is Brazil. So while we're saying to international students, we don't want you here, most of them are saying, we don't want to come here.
Yeah, that trend's been happening for years, actually, for the last 3 years before this. So Anyway, a lot more to say, Dave. We're going to have to hold some of your juice for next week,
no
man.
No problem.
Keep some of your fire packed there. All right, so several other big things to announce. The Ivy League was the first conference in March to say that they will not be participating in March Madness due to COVID-19. And then what happened was the other 31 or 32 other Division I conferences all followed suit and said, we will not participate either. And now they are the first conference to say no sports in the fall of 2021. So that's going to be an interesting story to watch. Football is obviously a much bigger revenue generator for the SEC and the Big Ten than it is for the Ivy League.
Yeah.
So I imagine they're going to try to do everything possible to not do that. It's also a big reason a lot of people, come to some of the big state schools. That's their version of the college experience. But just keep an eye on this. It's a very interesting story to watch and see how that unfolds. And we'll be coming back and commenting more in future weeks. I do want to, I'm going to consistently mention this right up until the time we have it. I said it last week. We have 3 admissions deans and directors that are holding special Q&A sessions just for our listeners. First one would be August 10th with Gil Villanueva, Direct Dean of Admission at University of Richmond. Next one will be September 15th with UC Santa Barbara's Director of Admission, Lisa Prescott. And then on October 13th with Sam Prouty of Middlebury. And I'm working on lining up some more, but I just want to see what attendance we get. You can, they're first come, first serve. We're capping them at 100. But it's a fantastic opportunity for college counselors, students, parents to ask 3 seasoned admission directors with over 75 years experience any question about college admissions or college. And to sign up, just go to yourcollegeboundkid.com, check the resources tab. And underneath the resources tab, you'll see another tab that says Q&A with YCBK interviewees. And there's just 6 real basic questions you fill out, and then you're signed up, your spot's reserved. I do want to announce, and thank you so much, our listeners. We did have some technical problems last week, and I only know this because multiple listeners sent in and told us at the 37-minute mark there was a 2-minute glitch. our sound engineer got it corrected the same day. Sorry about that. However, if you haven't listened to episode 127 yet, what you have to do is you have to delete it and re-upload it. And multiple people have told us that if you delete it and re-upload it, then it's fixed. Just want to share that for those who haven't heard it, and sorry for the inconvenience for those who did hear it. Now, our admissions tip, most our regular listeners will remember the last student I had on the podcast was Carmen Chavez, a student I worked with in Miami, Florida. I interviewed her about how she reached out to Duke University and got into online classes while she was still a student. And I was talking with her about an annual report that I produce every year for all of the students that I work with. And she gave me an idea. She said, Mark, why don't you include students in your annual report this year? And I said, oh, that's a great idea, Carmen. So I selected 30 students and I asked them to complete these profiles. And one of the questions in the profile is, what is your advice to students and to parents? So this is actually in my admissions tip this week. I'm going to share Carmen's advice, which I'm only sharing because she gave me permission to. It's very, very, very profound. And then I'm going to tell you how you can get all the other advice from these 30 students who are wise beyond their years. So this is what Carmen said. And by the way, it was taking her forever to turn this profile in. I said, Carmen, what's going on? You're like the last one. And it was your idea to do it. She said, I'm thinking really hard about what advice I want to give to parents and students. So when she gave me this, I said, okay, Carmen, this was worth the wait. Check this out, Dave.
Yep.
Try not to compare yourself to other students. It's an easy way to put yourself down, but it's important to remember that every applicant has a different resources. So it's impossible to replicate or match someone else's accomplishments. Focus on taking advantage of your own situation and making the best of what you have in front of you. Isn't that pretty deep for an 18-year-old?
That is really deep, and it applies not just to college, it applies to life. And that's one of the reasons why I believe one of the greatest impediments to young people's happiness is social media, because you have Facebook and you have silly college websites like College Confidential, where students get these incredibly unrealistic and fictitious comparisons that make even the most brightest and the best of them feel inadequate. So I can't reiterate enough that comparisons to others is the surest killer of your peace of mind and happiness that any individual, student or otherwise, can participate in.
Dave, I'm really glad you brought in that, because you're right. Like, this can apply to your salary. It can apply to who you're married to. It can apply to what your job satisfaction, your job description, the vacations you go on. I mean, really, literally has widespread ramifications for virtually everything.
That's right.
So, yeah, but for our students, and if you want to hear the advice of all of these 30 students, and they give advice to students and parents, I have them up on my college coaching website, which is schoolmatchforyou.com, schoolmatch4u.com. You just click a link that says college profiles, then click 2020, and you can read the advice. So your admissions tip this week is you get 30 tips. You get to hear what these very wise 18-year-olds wanted to say back to the next generation of 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th graders and their parents. And I've read them over and over again, and I shake my head how wise they are beyond their years. For our admissions vernacular, the word is cross-apps. You want to take a stab at that one, Dave?
Cross-apps. Well, I know there's cross-training. I know. That's when you do where you do swimming and you do biking and you do all these other things because you're
not even close right now, Dave.
Not even close. Anika, help me out. Wait, can I call a listener? I'm going to call Anika on this one.
Was it like 15 years ago, whatever? Can I get a lifeline?
Can I get a lifeline?
All right, so cross-apps cross-apps is a term. It's kind of admission officers use it. Refers to what schools students that apply to you also apply to. So it's really, who are your competitors?
Oh, okay.
So who do you have crossover applications with? In other words, students that applied to you, what other schools also apply to you? Does that make sense?
Oh, that does. That was second on my list.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right.
That was my number two choice.
There you go. So, for example, our college spotlight today is Carnegie Mellon, and they have a lot of cross apps with Cornell, MIT, Georgia Tech, and UPenn, amongst others. But those are 4 really big ones for them. So that's a term, cross apps. You'll hear college admissions officers use that occasionally. All right, Dave, article time. Take it away, my friend.
Let's turn to college hot topics in the news.
This article comes from Forbes, and it basically says that Williams College is doing something pretty radical. It is cutting tuition 15%, and that's on its comprehensive fees. So that's tuition, room, and board across the board, 15%. And it's going to be for all students one time for the years 2020 to 2021. And essentially the president said that because of the stabilizing impact of coronavirus, that they are going to make this cut in a bid to essentially make it more competitive to other students, and that they will have both online and in-person courses. However, along with that tuition cut, they are going to cancel the sports and travel for next year, which, of course, has been followed up by your announcement, Mark, that the whole Ivy League is doing that. So what does that mean? It means that the price of Williams College's, drum roll please, once and only price of $63,200. And from Brother Lincoln Penny here, that still sounds pretty expensive to me. But I'm going to do a McLaughlin line on you, Mark. It's saying that could this be the start of a new way to retain students? What say you, Mark?
Well, I think there's a lot of things going on here, and I think they're being quite prudent and judicious. I'd even say sagacious with this move, because what they're doing is they're getting out ahead of what would be an inevitable maelstrom. So 50 schools faced lawsuits last year because, people said, I'm paying for an online education. I'm not getting the same value. And so, it's kind of smart when you see something like a maelstrom coming like that, get out ahead of it. Mm-hmm. So they already knew they're cutting athletics, and after November, you're not coming back. And also online, they're giving students an option of going to school online or at home. And so it would be an inevitable situation. The online students would say, well, why should I have to pay the same as the students that are currently on campus? And so what better way to get ahead of it than to announce something like this? And I have to thank Carrie Rusk, one of our regular listeners, who originally sent the notice when this came out. And then, of course, this major article came to my attention, but it grabbed my mind right away because I thought of many different things and many reasons why this is significant. But one reason I can say, unapologetically, definitively, that I know that one of the motivations for this was looking over your back and looking what was coming your way if you didn't do something, is a quote in the article. And this is what it says. After college and university campuses abruptly closed this spring and classes moved online, students across the country filed lawsuits seeking partial tuition refunds. Whether students will be willing to pay full tuition this fall for online instruction, either offered on campus or remotely, has been a concern of university administrators. Yes, so they saw the stampede coming. Yep. And they were smart to go ahead, with this, in my opinion. And then, by the way, Princeton just announced in the last few days that they're doing a 10% tuition cut. Yep. So, and so several reasons why to me this is significant. One, what I've already said, getting out ahead, avoiding lawsuits, is inevitable. No athletics, leaving after Thanksgiving, some online. There's going to be blowback for that. Secondly, though, there's an ability to attract top kids with your competitors. There's some research out there that says $7,500 a year is enough of a difference that a significant number of people might change from their top choice to their second choice. And while Williams is very selective, the people that get in Williams are going to be getting into some very, very attractive options. Remember, $7,500 after taxes, that's after tax money. So that's 10 grand a year.
Yeah.
That's 40 grand.
Yep.
So 40 grand, if you have another really, really good option, that can help you on your yield.
Yep.
And we know there's going to be a battle more than ever for kids, and especially the top kids.
Right.
So I think it was also really prudent that way. It also avoids the blowback that they were going to get inevitably they're still going to get some, but not as much, about not having a different fee structure for online versus, people that try to stay home versus people that go to campus. Like, that's inevitable that people would push back on that. But I think that's significantly mollified by this $7,500 reduction. And they were smart enough to even extend it to people who are getting significant aid. They're still going to get a 15% reduction on what they're paying. And there are a couple other reasons I thought this was significant. Does this now signal a new trend we're going to start to see to a lower cost model?
Yep.
We've seen tuition resets for some time.
Yep.
And tuition resets are a little different than this. Tuition resets are schools that are hoping to get $45,000 out of a family, so they charge $60,000 and give everybody $15,000. And put a big $15 package in a bow and make you sound like you won an Olympic gold medal. And so you get to feel real special for the scholarship. But in reality, they really only wanted to get $45,000. This is not that. This is not a tuition reset. This could involve a new positioning. You could say it's a tuition reset, but it's not coming from a position of weakness in the market. It's coming from a position of trying to be aggressive and go after the top kids out there. So that's also significant. And then my other question is, how will less affluent schools survive? There's so many risk factors already in higher ed. And if the more prestigious schools start dropping their cost, how are other schools going to compete? And how will they not feel the pressure to lower their costs? So those are all my thoughts, Dave. Any thoughts that you have?
Well, the biggest thought I have is 15% is not enough. I mean, $63,000, $200, in my opinion, is still way too much for an online education. Because when you compare what you're going to get compared to the online education offerings of...
Well, Dave, keep in mind, though, most people are going to be coming back.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So what they've gone is to the same price whether you're going to school or not.
Yeah.
And so, it'll be interesting when we see the stats that come out to see what percentage do the online. I think another reason why they did it was also an incentive for people not to do the online. But I think I doubt it will be more than 10%. Another reasons that schools are doing this is they're trying to decrease the number of people that are taking gap years, because it's not in their financial model for 20, 25, 30% of schools to say they're going to take a gap. It's one thing when 2 to 4%, which is typically what schools see.
Yep.
And at the more selective levels, because gap years has been something that more affluent students have done where they travel around the world and that kind of thing. It's under 2 to 4% at your average public school, but at your highly selectives, it's usually 2 to 4%. But they budget for that. They don't budget for 25 or 30%.
Yeah.
And so that's another reason why I think they're doing it, is to decrease people that will say, I'll stay home. This is the kind of thing that the most expensive schools can do. And everybody else just doesn't really have that ability to do that without significantly changing their whole model in ways that, they may have to do it, but it's going to be incredibly painful. It's going to mean laying off lots and lots and lots of staff and faculty and going to much higher teacher-student ratios and reducing the compensation packages of the people that you have. And that's just a lot of pain for higher ed.
Now it's time for our step-by-step walkthrough of the college admissions process. Let me ask you this. So in CapEx, what types of scholarships do you find in there? Can you search local ones in their database and they pop up, or are there only certain ones in there?
No, they have local, statewide, and national.
Oh,
but it is a national database, so you can expect to have a lot of national ones in there.
Okay.
So I use them primarily as a source for national, although they do have some local and some statewide in there as well.
Okay. All right. So now before we go into where to find them, I just want to recap because you touched on a couple of these. So you talked about, when you're reading the applications thoroughly, like be very clear about what they're asking for.
Correct.
So you've already talked about, self-assessing, being honest with yourself. Do you meet the criteria? But a couple of action items you gave us one of them is to write down what they're looking for in a few words, just so you can have like your snapshot of, leadership in XX category in whatever, XYZ. Yep. So I thought that was extremely helpful. And then writing down past, current, and future experiences that align with the scholarship. So you're really almost brainstorming a list in front of you as you're reviewing the application itself.
Yeah, and a lot of times you can reach out. There's a contact person, listed, for them. And
that was the next one. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You can reach out. You can find some information on past award winners, as well as introduce yourself to. A lot of times that person may have some say, and they may be on a scholarship committee, and so it's just kind of good to begin to establish a little bit of rapport with them. This should be the student, not the parent. Those things are really good. Another thing that's really, really important is what I call develop your compelling narrative. Your compelling narrative, and your compelling narrative is you have to learn how to write well to do well scholarships. Like that's a key part because some of them have interviews, but most of them don't. So most of them, your writing becomes your interview. So you have to learn how to communicate very well your compelling narrative. And your compelling narrative is basically why somebody should invest in you. Okay, that's it. Yeah. And so one thing that's important is you have to remember no matter what the essay question is they ask you to write on, what they're really getting at is why should I invest in you and how do you compare to other applicants? So keep that in mind when you're writing. So if the writing question is, an idea or experience that changed your life, you need to keep in mind they're really indirectly asking for my compelling narrative. They're trying to figure out why should they invest in me and how am I different than the other applicants? So that's very important that you learn how to do that. It's kind of like, it's almost like people say, I got to get my stump speech down. I got to get my elevator pitch. Like you got to learn how to communicate your compelling narrative, and all of these essay questions, they all come back to that. Why should I invest in you? How are you different than the other applicants? And people, a lot of times they get all caught up in the details of being descriptive with the question, and they fail to convey why they are worthy of investing. And you have to do it kind of indirectly. Like you don't say, look, I'm the greatest thing since sliced cheese, sliced bread or whatever the saying is. You can't come out and do it like that. You have to, through the power of story, show how, like, kind of wow them with your character or what you've done so that they're thinking, like, I feel like we'll get a good return on our money by investing in this kid. Just think about it from a scholarship committee. Like they want to invest in people who are going to be difference makers. Mm-hmm. So you have to show that you're going to be a difference maker. So I definitely want to make sure that gets shared because that's another area where I see people make mistakes.
Okay. Now, one more thing before we go into where we're going to find these things. And it goes back to your points about reaching out to the contact. And one thing you mentioned in here is that ask questions, like reach out to that person. And even if you don't really have questions, come up with a good question just so you can kind of stand out and get into their minds a little bit. So I thought that was a pretty good point too.
Yeah. And especially, if you can couple that with any past information you can share with me about past award winners. A lot of times they can send you stuff, maybe links to articles, websites that have that type of information. You can really begin to learn a lot just looking at the past people who won. And it can definitely be a good way to figure out whether it's worth your time to pursue that scholarship too.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. You ready to go find them?
Yeah. Now in this find them, I'm not going to share all the websites because I'm going to get some of the websites more in recommended resources, but I want to talk, not so much generalities, but look, I'm really, really focused on this local piece because I can't emphasize it enough. So let's start with how you find local scholarships.
Okay. So how about let's start with the high school counselor in your own school?
Because that is the number one first source.
Right.
Because and why do you think that would be the number one first source, Anika?
Well, people seek, like the people that are trying to make these awards are trying to identify audiences. So of course they're going to reach out to the high school counselor who has access to all these brilliant students to say, hey, we got this scholarship over here. spread the word and let's see what happens.
Bingo, winner, chicken dinner.
Mm-hmm.
You got it. So especially when they want to disseminate this to somebody in the given area, they're absolutely going to go to schools in that area and let them be aware of them. It's also one of the jobs. That's also one of the jobs of, of people in those roles is to assemble, these type of databases.
Mm-hmm.
But they're constantly approached by people. By the way, before we get to this, I forgot a huge thing. I talked about membership scholarships. And identity scholarships and obstacle overcome scholarships. Another huge thing you want to look at is workplace scholarships. That's a whole other category.
Oh, yeah.
That's extremely important.
Mm-hmm.
Like my next door neighbor, got the, United Airlines scholarship because her mom worked there. It can be a parent or you worked at Chick-fil-A or you worked at Starbucks. Like these places, they have scholarships. These organizations have scholarships. And a lot of times they are going to prioritize somebody who worked there. Or if their parent worked there, you have the in. So I just want to make sure we throw that out as a huge category.
Okay.
Anika and I are so grateful for everyone who has financially supported our podcast. It allows us to pay our staff and cover our other auxiliary expenses involved in having a weekly professional podcast.
At the start of every month, we're going to start sending a special gift to anyone who financially supports your college-bound kid.
I will be sending our donors this bonus content once a month directly to your email. The bonus content will be between 10 to 15 minutes in length. Usually it will be a college-related topic that I'm passionate about. Occasionally, it'll be another bonus hot topic in the news segment. Sometimes it'll be an answer to a question that one of our listeners submits to us via email.
And you'll receive these monthly audio blogs for a gift of any amount. We know that $5,000 to one person is $5 to someone else, and we don't want your budget to be a hindrance to you receiving this additional bonus content. So if you want to support our show, just go to yourcollegeboundkid.com and click the donate button. And if you've already financially supported our podcast, you will automatically start receiving this bonus content via your email.
This bonus content is our way of letting our financial supporters know in a tangible way how much we appreciate you. And if you have any questions at all about our monthly bonus content, just send your questions our way. That's to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. Once again, questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com.
And then let's jump over to this other one though, because you also say to go to other schools in your area. Like you don't have to just necessarily stick with your own counselor, but you can seek out other high school counselors to see if they're getting something different, I guess.
This is actually a really important one. Because local scholarships are going to be prioritized local students. Mm-hmm. And so there's a couple, like your particular high school, they're going to know some, but they may not necessarily have the best database as much as another school does. So what I do with this is what I tell students to do. First of all, I would ask your current high school guidance counselor, what other schools in the area are you aware of that maintain really strong scholarship databases? So I would start by just asking them the question. Mm-hmm. Let's say they say, well, I'm sorry, I don't know of any. Or maybe they say, oh, here's one. But you want to know more than one. So then the next thing you want to do is take a look at different high schools in your area, go to their website and see if they have a specific scholarship portal. A lot of them will.
Okay.
And that's a fantastic way to find local scholarships. Fantastic way.
Okay.
So start with your high school, then look at other high schools in the area. Any other ways, Anika, you can think of find local scholarships?
Well, I mean,
there's several others.
Yeah, we talked about local civic organizations. So, naturally the churches and the foundations and things like that are in your area. So those. So how about this one, Mark? So, and it's funny because I bought this book, The Ultimate Scholarship Book.
Yeah. So that is a guide that I recommend everybody purchase. A lot of my students win scholarships out of there. It's updated every year and it's organized very well. Mm-hmm. And you can search by state, by interest, by major, by ethnicity, by area of interest. I mean, there's just it's a really convenient way they've got this. I feel like they really need to give me a little chunk of those sales. I cannot. People. So now I'm going to say something, so I did a recommended resource on that, a while ago, and all of our resources that we have up on yourcollegeboundkid.com, you click your collegeaboutkid.com, you click the resource tab. If it says books and you buy it there, it's like an Amazon link, and they send about 25 cents to us, to our School Match View account. I'll take my little nickel or quarter, if it's even that. We'll take it. Every little bit helps. I'm starting to feel a little jealousy with how much money I've sent them. But no, that book is fantastic as a source, and it's one national source that I like. And I wasn't going to do a recommended resource on that one because I already did it before. But I'll tell you some other really good sources for local scholarships besides your own school and besides other schools in the area are local libraries. Local libraries are really good. That's another place where, that's another place where, benefactors make aware of scholarships.
Huh. Okay.
Local libraries is really good. Another one is local newspapers. Local newspapers, they put scholarships in there. And then I mentioned before the 4th C. Are you familiar with community foundations, Anika?
I am. Yeah.
Yeah. So community foundations are great because they tend to be more in cities than smaller neighborhoods, but you got this collection of people, like you got the business leaders and then the education leaders and the politicians and the ministers, and they all want to make their local areas stronger. And they all always have a scholarship component. And what I encourage everybody to do is just do a Google search, put wherever you live, put Community Foundation Greensboro, Community Foundation, Charlotte, and just see what pops up, and then go to their website and see what scholarships they list there. Right. So that's another really, really good source for local scholarships. We should personalize this, Anika, because why don't you talk about the scholarship that, let's just start with NAIA. You start with the scholarship that NAIA won, and it's an example of a local scholarship. So why don't you talk about it?
Yeah, so the Links chapter of Bucks County in Pennsylvania, they gave her a very generous, she interviewed for the scholarship, but it was through her school that they contacted again to say, hey, we're here. You've got great students over there. Let's take a look. And so they interviewed the students, and she ended up with $2,000 a year over the course of her 4 years. So $8,000.
Yeah, there you go.
So that was pretty cool.
Yeah. And so this is the thing. Now I want to say this about scholarships. This is very important. For the longest time, I would tell people all the stuff we're talking about. Not only would they not win them, they wouldn't apply. Mm-hmm. And so what I realized is this. When you look at school has so many built-in methods of accountability that get you where you're trying to go. So let's just name like 6 or 7 of them. There's tests. There's quizzes. There's teacher comments that can get sent home from some schools. There's parent-teacher conferences. There's attendance records, papers, and there's consequences for all these things. If you don't get good grades, you don't pass, and all these things build accountability in. With this, you're just kind of like on your own to do it, and it overwhelms people how many different ones are out there and where do I start?
Yep.
And so what I have learned, and this is one of the remember before I said local, that might be the most important thing I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And then I said, well, maybe something else. So what was the other thing in the voice in my head that's extremely important for scholarships is this. People need to set a goal. Let's say it's going to be 1 a week. Say you start in your junior year, you can do 100 scholarship applications. Junior year, 1 a week, whatever your goal is. Okay. 2 a month. Okay. Say 2 a month starting your junior year. That's 24 a year, 24 junior, 24 senior year, 48. So one, you need a goal, but this is also the most important part. An accountability partner.
Ooh, yes.
You have to have an accountability partner. And that for some people, a parent works well. For other people, it's a peer. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I've seen this work well where like 2 peers will do it and they'll even like have a contest with each other, And so what my experience is without that accountability partner, it just doesn't get done. There's too many things coming at us for our time. And, both of my kids did okay with scholarships. Like Karis actually won one big one and one pretty big one. And Joy, she put all her eggs in the athletic basket because she, everything for her was she's going to play basketball. Mm-hmm. She broke her leg and then she ended up having like probably about 6 or 7 offers, but she didn't like any of the schools. And then she always had the Georgia State scholarship to fall back on. So she ended up, getting almost her full tuition covered. But what I have experienced with both of my kids would not have done all these on their own and really done the work. They just wouldn't have. And I wasn't gonna do it for them.
Right.
Now, fortunately, Karis ended up being fortunate because she did get 2 and they're pretty big. One was $20,000 and one was like $4,500 a year, and it was renewable for 4 years. The other thing is most of the time outside scholarships are 1 year. So if you can get them renewable over 4 years, those are great.
Oh, yeah.
So did we scholarship ourselves out, Anika? Is there anything else you want to talk about?
Yes, there's one very important one we didn't mention, and that's for current college students. Like
yes, I'm so glad you brought that up.
If you are a current college student, you need to go to your school's financial aid office. They are your repository of information for scholarships moving forward.
10 minutes ago, that was in my head, and I was thinking, don't forget to say that, Mark. Don't forget to say that, Mark. And then I was going to forget to say it. So thank you for being my back. You've got my back.
Your accountability partner.
Yes. Oh, you got my back. So, thank you for bringing that up. That is extremely important because the goal of these financial aid officers is to make the finances work. And sure, they'll talk to you about different loans and different work study opportunities, but they know a lot of times where the money is. And now a lot of times they're on, online bulletin boards they have, but a lot of times they know of stuff that may not even be posted. And so you want to build a really good relationship with them, and you want to ask them if they know of any scholarships that a student like me, should consider applying for. Absolutely. So thank you for bringing that in, Anika.
All right. Bada bing. I think we did it.
Bada bing, bada bong. You are awesome.
Yay.
Can I call you my work wife, or is that not appropriate?
Ask Anitra.
Oh, okay. I got that from Dave. Dave's that's a good answer. Dave's got this physician assistant he works with, and he's always telling me about it. Like, that's my work wife. And they get into it too, like cats and dogs, especially when they talk politics.
I'm good. It depends on the wife.
Okay, smart answer. Oh wow, that's great. All right, let's transition.
It's time for a question from one of our listeners.
All right, Mark, the students are rolling in. So we got Miss Claire this week. She is a student from Chicago. And listen to this question. She says, is this strenuous process of selecting colleges really worth it? Mark Stucker.
When that question came across, I said, wow, that is deep. Mm-hmm. So before I answer it, I do this every now and then, Anika. I do. How would you answer it?
Well, I think it depends on the person, because there is a thing that college is not for everybody. So I think that deserves first acknowledgement. So it really depends on you as a person, as an individual. Like, are you doing this because you want to do it? Because you have some goals related to higher education? Are you doing it because you've been pressured by your parents to say you're going to college? I don't care if you hate it. I think that little self-assessment should be rolling in at some point.
So I agree 100% with your it depends. Now, I'll broaden the answer out a little different because I think Claire was not talking about do I go to college or not. It was the strenuous process of trying to get into a select school.
You think so?
Well, let me give you a little bit of in interest of full disclosure. So I'm working with Claire. Okay. So,
okay. Oh, so you know. Okay. You know.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So she asked this question and I was like, whoa, that's profound. Can I share it on the podcast?
Okay.
And she said, sure. Her mom was so cool too. They're like, sure. So So I know a little bit of background. So she's definitely college bound, but is striving to go to these selective high competitive. Is it worth it? But I still agree 100% with your it depends answer. And here's the things that it depends on. So first of all, what I would say is most things that are really important in life are worth putting the research and time into. Case in point, I said a few weeks ago, I can't remember if it was with you or Dave, but was it you, Nico? When I said that when we moved from Westchester, Pennsylvania down here, I had 900 pages of research and I printed them out off of our printer on 8.5 by 11. Yeah, I had to go get a few cartridges in there.
It wasn't me, but I believe it.
Okay, yeah. Because I had 900 pages of research. I was trying to decide between Raleigh, I won't say Greensboro. No, Raleigh, Charlotte and the ATL.
Mm-hmm.
And there was so much to look at because you had to look at where you live. There's all the housing, what location. Then there's all the schools. And then I was looking for a job. I mean, there was just so much, right? Because I did something different than most people. I made up my mind where I wanted to live. Of course, I had to have the family come on board. And then I said, I'm going to find work where I want to live, where most people just go wherever their job dictates. So I did it. So I said, where do I want to live? I can't take this cold anymore. So it was worth all that time to put that in. Big decisions are worth it. I can't tell you how many people go into a job and they wish they would have done more work and more research on the front end because there's so many things they found out on the back end. And don't even let us talk about how many people, got in a relationship and wish they would have done more homework, So what I want to say is like in general, the big things in life and when you're an 18-year-old and you're deciding where to go away to college, that's probably the biggest decision you made at that point in your life. That's a big decision, especially if you're, not looking at just being a commuter student and attending like a few local schools in the area, but you're looking at like all kinds of different states that you may be considering. Am I going to be in the North or the South or the Midwest or the West? You know what I mean? Big and small and this and that. I mean, there's a lot involved in that. So that's a big life decision. So in general, I'm going to say that it absolutely is worth it. College is what you make of it. But the more you put your time into thinking through what you're looking for in this experience, the more likely you are to find an environment, not only where you'll be happy, but where you can reach your full potential. Because I always try to push back. It's not just about being happy. It's about reaching your full potential. So you're trying to find both. So in general, I'm going to say that it is worth putting the time in. And it's not just true for this, but it's true for all the big decisions in life. It's absolutely worth putting the time in. Now, what's the other side of it, Anika? What's the side of it where I say that, it may not be worth it? Any thoughts on that?
I'm going to guess where... no, I'm not. Go ahead.
You thought you can't fake it on the podcast. You can't just say, I'm going to say, because at some point something has to come out.
Won't even try it.
So here's the side where I say it's not worth it. It's not worth it if you're going to obsess about getting into one or two or even three schools. Okay. Yeah. It's not worth it. What I want everybody to do is to get their list. And in most cases, that's going to be between 6 to 13 schools the majority of the time. If someone's doing a national search, if you're just looking at going locally, is less than that. Or if your top school that you're interested in is a high probable admit for you, then you don't need that many. But if you're looking at doing a national search, you're looking at a lot of different places, and your top schools are some of the harder ones to get into. For most people, 6 to 13 is going to be the right number of schools. And it's going to depend whether in some cases it's 6, in some cases, at a minimum, call them whatever you want to call them. But at a minimum, there should be, 2 that are going to be challenging to get into, 2 that could go either way, and 2 that are highly probable. You can put whatever names you want on them at a minimum. So you want to go 2-2-2 or 4-4-4 or 3-3-3. So somewhere in that range. Okay. But I want people to have the mindset that any one of the schools I've applied to is going to be fine. If you can put yourself in that mindset, okay, then it's cool. But if you're going to obsess and be like, if I don't get in like one of these top 3, then I'm going to act like I'm crushed, and I'm a loser, then that's not healthy. If you can't get yourself in that mindset, then it may not be worth it for you to go through all that. Another thing that I'll say is if it's going to so impact your mental health that you can't do well and can't function properly in other aspects of life, then it may not be worth it for you either. So there's some cautions and some caveats and some maybes in there. In general, I think it absolutely is worth it. But you need to be able to do it with the perspective of any of these schools that I ultimately apply to can get me where I'm trying to go. I can make my own happiness. They all have great teachers and bad teachers. Some people I'll like and some I won't like. Some clubs I'll like and some I won't like. Some local restaurants in the area I'll like and some I won't like. They all have they all have opportunities galore, and they will also have things I don't like about them. And I will ferret out the chaff from the wheat and roll with it and make it work and have a wonderful experience. And it's not going to be heaven on earth, but it can be 4 fantastic years of my life. If you have that mindset, then I think it's absolutely worth going through that process to get the match right. So what are your thoughts?
Now, I'm assuming you shared that exact response with Miss Claire already. So what was her response to that, if you don't mind sharing? Or she doesn't mind you sharing.
She's a great kid, and so are her parents. But she's very balanced and just has just the outlook that you'd want on life. So she, I didn't go in this much depth on the answer, to be quite honest, because I said, I'm going to answer that on a podcast, but I touched on it, and I was very pleased with her attitude. It's very balanced. Most kids are going to be excited about the most selective colleges on their list. They get attracted to those schools because there's a lot of prestige, and they're going to get a lot of affirmation from everybody around them. Like, "Ooh, you got in there. Oh my goodness." So there's like a natural built-in sort of award system within peer culture for people going to those type of schools. What I look for is people that can be excited about going to a school that is still a school of excellence, and employers know it's really good, and grad schools know it's really good, but it's not necessarily a household name. Can you be excited with that school? When kids get to that point, they're in a really strong place. And I feel like Claire has a really good perspective, and so does her mom.
Oh, good for you, Claire. Good for you, Mama Claire.
Shout out to Christine.
Christine.
Yeah, awesome. So, any more questions, comments, thoughts?
I think we got it.
By the way, I don't just put people's names out on the podcast without getting permission first, just so you know. I don't want people to say, I'm not talking to that guy. All my business is going to be on the streets.
Yes, you take that very seriously, by the way. Yes, you do.
No, you have to do that when you do this. You can't put people's business on the streets.
Stop talking.
That's a quick way to get fired. Oh, Nika, I love doing the podcast with you. I so appreciate you. Can you believe we've been doing this now? We're 129 episodes.
I told you, Javon's like, y'all not finished
yet? Well, you know what? Should I announce this now? When we get to 171 chapters, we're going to keep the podcast going, but we're dropping the book chapter section. It will be a little shorter. We'll take about 15, 20 minutes off the podcast. We'll still have our article in the news, and we'll still have our question from a listener, and we'll still have our interview, and we'll still have our college spotlights. But we had talked about, do we get another book and go through it? No.
It's all about your book, which everybody needs to get, by the way. Please get that thing.
Oh, it's kind of you, Nika. Kind of you.
Please, I'm telling you.
Awesome. All right. Well, get some sleep. I'm about to get some food, and I just bought these new cherries, and they're amazing. And the cherries are my favorite. I'm about to go chow down on some cherries.
Okay, Janaea, that's her thing.
Okay, friends, we're in part 2, and Gil Villanueva talks about fee waivers and application fees. He also talks about community colleges and community-based organizations. He also talks about how important it is for students to be initiators in the process. And he talks about how he struggled himself as a student with imposter syndrome when he was at Pitzer. And he tells us what imposter syndrome is. Listen and enjoy.
And now, this week's interview with a special guest.
I always tell young people, okay, if they're reaching out to you, there's something about you that they like, but you still have to do your research. You still have to understand, what is the institution's culture? Where do you fit within that context? You want to know what else is going on out there. Like a big thing that's going on right now in our nation is that so many colleges and universities are declaring a test optional policy, at least for 1 year for this upcoming cycle. And some are doing it for 2 years. Some are doing it for 3 years. And a few are saying, that's it. We're just going to be test optional from now on. So I think it's something important to pay attention to. I know certainly from personal experience with my own daughter and my own son that, I can tell that colleges bought their names soon after they've taken either the practice test score or the SAT or the ACT, because all of a sudden I can see some of the caliber of schools that are now sending them information. So again, ultimately, do some research. And if you have access to a school counselor, an independent counselor, please, by all means, access and certainly ask them about their thoughts and their opinions and ultimately their guidance.
Do you feel, Gil, if there's a under-resourced student and they're very interested in college, maybe they're getting some of this mail, and would you encourage them, to reach out and to ask if the application fee can be waived? If it's not automatically waived, do you think that's something that a student should do or not do? What are your thoughts on that?
Mark, I wish someone told me that application fees could be waived.
You'd have a few more pennies in your pocket.
When I applied to colleges, of course, I missed the UC deadlines because, at that point, I didn't know I was going to go to college. It was not even a glimmer in my eye. And so I ended up applying to, a couple of other state institutions and some private schools. And there's application fees. I remember asking my mother, "Hey, Mom, do we have $25? Do we have $35? And she goes, "Well, pick two schools." So I ended up applying to just two schools because, back then, $50, $60 is a lot for my family. So I tell young people all the time, oh my gosh, please, 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 please check if there are fee waivers, not just for the application fee, but let's say for, the testing that's becoming, again, more and more optional in our nation. Other opportunities, such as you mentioned, fly-ins, most of them should be free. Most of them should not charge you a dime, right? And in fact, I would worry a little bit if some of them are asking you for some kind of payment. So again, utilize what you have in front of you, but at the very, very least, understand there's the internet out there. If a school's sending you something, go to their website to verify and check.
Yeah, and I also want to encourage students to reach out and ask if they're not getting any counseling. Ask if they know of someone who would give them some guidance in this process, because there are not only are there organizations that provide some service for, some counseling for under-resourced students, but even a lot of independent college counselors will take on a few students pro bono and help them out. And something one of my colleagues at KIPP taught me a long time ago, she's South Carolina. She had all those South Carolinian phrases, and she used to always say, closed mouths don't get fed, and you got to speak up. You got to speak up and ask. It never hurts to ask. It never hurts to ask.
Absolutely. And if I may just add one thing, and I always feel that the heavy lifting in this country, in the United States, it's really not being, performed by the 4-year colleges and universities. It's really being performed by the community colleges, by the community-based organizations. Because to me, sometimes when you think about as a group, in aggregate, some of these really selective schools, the kind of students, the vast majority of students that are applying to these schools tend to come from, means and households with resources, or at least at the very least, students that are pretty well prepared academically. So now, wait a minute. Now, you and I know that so many high school students are graduating each and every year. And you and I know that not all of them are going to these 4-year colleges and universities. So where are they going? So I always feel like, again, the good work is really happening, in the community surrounding these students.
I'm really glad you mentioned that. I felt for a long time that community colleges in particular, very underutilized by four-year schools as recruitment sources. And I think that's starting to change as if you really want kids from, this demographic, that's a great place to find them. But also there are some really great ones out there that are doing really good work, that are really preparing people to transition to four-year schools and excel when they get there. So really glad that you did that shout out. So Gil, let's talk a little bit about some of the things that you've done, whether it's at UR or Brandeis or Bucknell or Harvey Mudd, to help with retention and graduation. But maybe if you could speak in terms of speaking to a student, like what are some things that students can do to increase their chances of graduating once they get there? Maybe resources that are available that maybe some students find out about and others don't. Anything you want to share that you've learned, either programs that you've had or currently have that really help? Because at the end of the day, it's not about getting in, but it's about getting out and then excelling when you get out, right? So it's one thing to get in, is another thing to get out with the degree.
Absolutely. And I'll begin with a quick personal story. I ended up going to Pitzer College, and I certainly, and back then I didn't know what the term was, but I certainly suffered from imposter syndrome, where I really questioned, my
define that for us, because not everybody knows that term. That's a term we use a lot in admissions, but not everybody in our audience will be familiar with the imposter syndrome. So I'm glad you brought it up.
Sure.
If you could explain that, that'd be great.
I was questioning really my belonging at my college. Did I truly belong here? Was it, did they make a mistake in offering me admission? And my gosh, I feel like a fish out of water, because it's a predominantly white and wealthy institution, not many students of color, certainly not many low-income students at the time. And I really felt a little bit out of place. So I tell young people, be confident that if an institution offers you admission and they're doing all these things to get you to deposit and ultimately to enroll and matriculate, they want you on that campus. So if that is then the case, you owe it to yourself to find out, okay, what are the resources available to me as a student on these campuses? Because again, it's not just going to be academic resources and support. You want to know about social programming. You want to know about, within my particular, let's say, cohort, are there students like me that are receiving whatever guidance from whatever office or department? So you want to know all of these things before you decide on any institution. And once you're there, please, again, be confident you belong at that institution. And there will be lots of things in place there for you to succeed. And certainly, to your point, thrive after graduation. So there are no colleges or university that I'm familiar with that are not interested in recruiting happy future alumni. All of these schools want students who will thrive academically, socially, and certainly carry the banner for that institution moving forward. So there is an investment that will be afforded to you by these schools. The question now is, to what extent, right? And how good are they in doing their outreach and letting you know that you belong each and every day?
Let's take a break to learn about Mark's recommended resource for the week.
Friends, as promised, I'm going to be giving you several very good resources to help you and your child find and win private or outside scholarships. Those are synonyms: private scholarships, outside scholarships. I gave you the Ultimate Scholarship Guide in episode 32, and that is my favorite book by far. It's the only book I recommend people use. Other tools are a lot of websites and other resources. Today, I'm going to give you my absolute favorite website, or one of my favorite websites, and it is howtowinscholarships.com. It's the work of Monica Matthews, who was a teacher and a mom. Monica had 3 kids and she could not afford the cost of college. So she made it her full-time job to find out how to win scholarships for her kids. And she won tens of thousands of scholarships from these outside private vendors. One thing Monica did was she interviewed a lot of people who serve on scholarship committees to find out what they look for. This was 15 years ago. And for the last 15 years, she's been on a mission to learn everything she can about outside scholarships and to communicate them to you. My favorite part of the website is her blog. I think it's actually better than her guides, and the blog is free. You will see the link to the blog in the top right corner of the homepage of her website. And I encourage you to read every single article on her blog. Once again, that website is howtowinscholarships.com, but it's the number 2. So winscholarships.com. We will now return to my interview with Gil Villanueva, Director and Dean of Admission at the University of Richmond. And let's talk about some of the resources that are there. Maybe not all schools have these resources, but some do. You know, for example, you want to talk a little bit about affinity groups. Some schools have cultural houses and that kind of thing. Any of the schools you've worked with have either of those, Gil? You want to comment on the role they've played?
Sure. I can certainly speak about the University of Richmond, and we're really, again, outcomes is a big deal for us, making sure our students, we retain at such a high rate, one of the highest in the country. The graduation rate is equally high. Our students, if you're not employed or in graduate school within 6 months, you're actually the exception, because we have one of the top career services department in the United States. But more importantly, we have not just programs, but we have staff and departments committed to student success. So, for instance, we have Spider Firsts at the University of Richmond, and this organization is led by staff and the student development, our student development division, the Office of Common Ground, whereby we want to make sure all first-generation college students understand all the resources that are available to them at the University of Richmond. And earlier you talked about, well, are there special spaces available? Absolutely. I would argue that most institutions have some kind of multicultural space. And of course, for those that are thinking about activities, so that's something you want to think about also. Do they have activities available to you? Some students are interested in Greek life. Let's say Black sororities or fraternities. You want to account for those things. So I always feel that, again, it all amounts to, you doing some legwork, doing some research and making it happen. So, and I go back I'll end with this. When what I started earlier, hope is not a strategy. You got to go out there and learn and make it happen for yourself. And once you're on that campus, I mean this earnestly. You can't sit there and wait around thinking things are going to happen to you or for you. You got to knock on some doors sometimes. And that is perfectly fine.
Yeah. And one thing that I really encourage students to do is to look into orientation programs. So a lot of schools will have either like multicultural student orientation programs. Some of them have it for first gen, and maybe you come 3 or 4 days ahead of time. And what I love about those programs is you're introduced to all of the resources usually that the school has available. You meet the key people, whether it's multicultural student affairs, whether it's the vising system, or all of the different things. We couldn't really list all of them here because there's so many different options that are there, and different schools do it differently. But that's a fantastic opportunity for schools that have those orientation programs. And I know I just hear such incredible feedback from virtually everybody that goes through that process. Not the only thing, but it's a good way to know what are your resources and to meet key people. And a lot of times there's a lot of straight talk that happens there as well, as they give you guidance about going through the school. So I just wanted to put in a little chime for that. So as we wind down here now,
may I
Gil,
add one thing to that, if I may?
Yeah, go ahead.
You nailed that. Certainly, that was perfect. And the other thing I wanted to point out, that students, you're in a position to give feedback. So when things are not going as well and you're having some trouble, my gosh, raise your hand, extend that information, right? And of course, in the end of the year, also you have an opportunity to talk about your overall experience to the student development staff or someone who you feel really strongly have some kind of kinship or relationship with at that institution. So voice your concerns and talk about the things that you want to see more of.
Yeah, and I would encourage people right from the start in the process to ask an admission officers or, any resources for first generation students or under-resourced students. Because usually the admission officer will know. And if they don't know, they can at least find out and introduce you to somebody. And it's also a good way to compare your schools. You should be wanting to know how will the school support somebody like me? And that should be something that's part of your evaluation of the school. It's a big difference if a school says we don't really have anything like that versus someone that says we have this opportunity. Let me let you speak to so-and-so. This person might be very helpful for you to talk to. Like, that's the kind of question that I would encourage an under-resourced student to ask actually in the admission process.
Right on.
So, Gil, as we wind down, anything that you haven't shared on this topic that's just kind of on your mind, on your heart, you just kind of want to leave with our listeners before we say adios?
Well, I'm going to share with you listeners, especially students, what I tell my daughter all the time. And, she's a little bit worried that because of the disruptions and all the things that she was not able to do and pursue, at the end of the spring semester and over the summer, I tell her to hang in there and understand that there are so many colleges that would want a dynamic and talented and kind person like you on their campuses. So I share that with all students. You're going to have many choices. I want you to do your homework and whenever possible and wherever possible, utilize the resources around you.
You know what you reminded me? I want to share something when you say this. So this is a school you'll be real familiar with, Gil, the Episcopal High School in Alexandria, Virginia. And, it's a school that I've sent a lot of kids to, probably 10 or 11 on my boarding school placement side. And most of these kids I've sent there have come from KIPP, and they have been, the majority of them have been students of color who were under-resourced. And I was meeting with their leadership team, and I said to them, tell me what you're looking for. This is way back. This is before I started sending them a bunch of kids. Like, tell me the kind of kid that's going to excite you, that's going to get through your admission process. And they said, well, and they're, and these are real transparent conversations we have. And they say, well, Mark, as you know, we have a lot of really high powered families here, a lot of senators and members of the House and diplomats, dignitaries, and there's a lot of wealth in our community. And over the years, we've seen two different kinds of kids that come through the process, that are coming from an under-resourced background or student of color, under-resourced background. They said they walk in and they kind of wilt, like they're like wallflowers, like they're intimidated. Maybe intimidated by all the money, the power, whatever, all the trappings of what made you feel at times the imposter syndrome, right? And they said, there's another kid that walks in like they own the room. Send us the kid that walks in and feels like they own the room. And I know that's easier said than done, because if you don't have that confidence, then it's hard to fake it till you make it. But the reason why I bring that up is because sometimes with under-resourced students, there is an intimidation, and a lot of it is around money. Students will say things like, man, these kids are driving Lexuses and Mercedes-Benz and they're 19 years old, and they're intimidated by that. And what I want students to understand is you bring every bit as much to that campus as anybody else whose dad's got a name on a building. You're going to challenge people to think differently. You're going to read the text differently. So when it comes to discussions in class, you'll have a different perspective on what you'll say and the angles to which you'll approach a conversation. And you'll enhance the educational experience of everybody that you encounter. There may be nobody that they've met that's like you. And so you're every bit as valuable in what you're bringing to that campus, even if you're not bringing dollars. And just keep that in mind, not in a egotistical sense, but walk in like you own the room, like nobody here is any better than I am just because they're wealthy. So I don't know. I just felt kind of led to share that. I don't know. Did that make any sense, Gil?
Perfect. I can't add to that.
Cool. Well, normally, Gil, our listeners know I close the podcast out by putting you on the hot seat and asking you some what we call our lightning round. But I'm not going to do that now because we're blessed to have you back next week to talk about the University of Richmond. So we're going to do a part 2 on this one. So I'm warning you right now, I'm going to hit you up with some personal questions at the end. So get ready.
I look forward to that, Mark.
Next week in the news, civil war between the Trump administration and higher ed to deny visas to international students who are studying online for the fall of 2020. Mark and Anika will discuss, is it true that some colleges will reduce my grants if I receive a private scholarship? We won't have a question of a listener, but we'll have bonus content. And there will be no college spotlight as Gil Villanueva will discuss the University of Richmond in our interview.
All right, friends, but it's time for our college spotlight today, and it's Carnegie Mellon. When I say Carnegie Mellon, Dave, what comes to mind for you?
Pittsburgh, great technology school, great medical institution.
Okay. I figured you would say Pittsburgh, and I figured you'd say great technology school. That's the stereotype, and it is all true, but it's so much more than that. So let's get into it. So when you think about Carnegie Mellon, there's a focus on being trailblazers for innovation. In fact, I love their motto, choose your program, change the world. But what's unique about Carnegie Mellon, maybe more so than almost any other institution I can think of in the country, is the way they combined science with the humanities and the arts. All three of them. You don't find very many schools that have the excellence on the tech side and then world-renowned arts program like they have. Do you know, Dave, that the hardest program to get into in Carnegie Mellon is not a STEM program?
Actually, I heard this. I heard it was their it's their acting and drama.
Correct.
Yeah.
Guess what their acceptance rate is?
It's like less than 5%.
Correct. 3%.
Yeah.
So they have top tier arts with science and technology and humanities and social sciences. In fact, what they refer to it as is liberal pre-professional education. There's a huge focus on interdisciplinary learning. Now let's talk about who goes to Carnegie Mellon. A lot of really driven kids, wicked smart kids, ambitious kids that sort of feel like they've been yearning to be around that type of kid all their life. And now they're all together and it is invigorating. There's another kind of kid, and I've worked with both types, who feel like Carnegie Mellon is too intense and it's not for them. There are smart kids there. Remember Mark Kantrowitz, Dave? You remember you were blown away by him.
Oh, yes. Mark, he whose IQ will not be known.
Yeah, well, you talked about something he did, but something that showed you his intelligence. I was blown away by the fact that as an 18-year-old, they threw him into MIT grad school courses because he wasn't being challenged.
That's right, and he is it Native American Indigenous art? No. It's not
Aboriginal.
Aboriginal, yes, right. Australian Aboriginal art. As well as he likes doing those wordgrams, those anagrams, those
correct.
Those you start with ladder and you end up with postal master.
Good memory. For those who are wondering, I'm talking about laddergram. I did a 4-part interview with Mark Kantrowitz probably 6 months or so ago. You can see it if you go to Your College Bound Kid and look up our interview tab. All our interviews are there, by the way, as well as all of our college spotlights are all there. But Mark, of course, had multiple degrees from multiple schools, MIT, and multiple degrees from Carnegie Mellon. That's the kind of high-powered person that you'll find at CMU. History of CMU is that 2 institutions merged in 1967, the Carnegie Institute of Technology and the Mellon Institute. Now, people have a tendency to think Pittsburgh, steel mills, old industrial town. Those who think that way don't know the new Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's actually now a very exciting place to live and go to school. If you can handle the frigid temperatures in the winter, I had to get that in there. Mm-hmm. But they have had a complete revamping and there are literally no steel mills there anymore. It's not the old industrial town anymore. It's now a world-class place when it comes to opportunities in the medical field, and it is a tech hub. It is a tech hub and an education hub. And so one thing that's nice for Carnegie Mellon students is their student ID allows them to use public transportation and get all around throughout the whole city. They're also located in a real upscale part of Pittsburgh known as Oakland. It's actually the most affluent section of Pittsburgh, well-manicured parks, museums, all of that right there. And one of the things you need to know about CMU is when you apply to CMU, you are applying directly into one of 7 colleges. So let's talk about those 7 colleges. One of the most frequent questions that comes up to CMU admissions officers is, can you apply undecided? And the answer is no. You can be undecided within a college, but you've got to declare one of these 7 colleges. A second common question is it possible to transfer from one college to another? The answer is yes, but it's very hard to do, and you should not come there expecting to be able to do it. So what are these 7 colleges? Well, there's the Dietrich College of Humanities and Social Sciences. Okay, there's 10 departments in here, and they focus on 5 things here: communicating, reflecting, modeling, deciding, and creating. The faculty of Dietrich College pioneered 3 completely unique fields of study that have spread across the country to other campuses. They've pioneered what's known as decision science. They pioneered behavioral economics, and they pioneered technical writing, which is one of their strongest programs. The second college we have is the Melon College of Science. And this is biology, chemistry, physics, math, biostats. 70% of students at Carnegie Mellon participate in research. They have over 100 research centers or research institutes. So if research is something very important to you and you're an exceptionally strong student, this is a school that you should seriously explore. They also have a health professions program, a pre-med program, that's also really attractive. Next, we have the College of Fine Arts, which is an exceptional school. One could argue it's every bit as strong as their computer science, which is what they're most known for. 5 colleges within the College of Fine Arts, and they are art, architecture, drama, design, and music. Now, this isn't music. This is an intensive conservatory studio level training for the serious applicant. This is for people that want art as a career. And the admission process is completely different over here. We're talking auditions, portfolios, interviews, or video submissions. One of those things will be required depending on whether you're looking at art, architecture, drama, design, or music. They all have their own websites. So if you're interested in that, you need to check out each individual website for each one of those programs. They also have very different admission deadlines. So it's a separate process that's different than the rest of the school. But that program is just top of the line. A lot of times, Dave, I'll work with just incredibly talented artists, but they don't want to go to a conservatory that's not part of a larger university. Yeah. You know, or they don't want to go to an art school. They want to be part of they want to be encompassed within the frames of a university that offers, full blown programming. And a place like Carnegie Mellon can be really, really attractive.
Fantastic.
Next, we have their School of Computer Science, which is their most famous major, along with the art, but more people know the computer science. And they're in the conversation consistently for the top computer science program in the country. They're always considered, definitely 1, 2, 3. They compete with Stanford, Cal Berkeley, Georgia Tech, a few others that are in there, but they're always up there. Caltech is also in that conversation, and MIT. But an unbelievable computer science program, and they have a separate Doha, Qatar campus. It's a sister campus that a lot of computer science study goes on there. It's not the only thing. But how good could Google think their computer science is? They said, you know what? Instead of you coming out to see us, we will locate and create a whole office right by your campus so we can recruit your top talent. A very strong computational biology major, computer science, of course. They have a new degree in artificial intelligence.
Wow.
And one thing about their School of Computer Science is it's a lot more theoretically focused than everyday problem solving focused. The focus is on the future. So they're more theoreticians. It's high level math. And so you say, well, what about the person that's more interested in the problem solving component of computer science? they've got that covered because they have a whole entire school of information systems. That's where you go if you want to work on the real world problem solving, everyday problem solving computer science. That would be your school you'd apply to. But you need to know this on the front end, which one you're interested in applying to. And very popular majors here are things like data science and data analytics in that school. Another exceptionally strong school is the School of Engineering. Now, what happens here is everybody comes in as a general engineer. They all take the same courses. And then you get to declare after a year which course of engineering you're going to pursue. And the choices really are mechanical, chemical, civil and environmental, electrical and computer, and then material science. I've had multiple people go there for material science. It's a fantastic program.
Yeah.
And they have two other courses of study, biomedical engineering and engineering and public policy. Now, the one thing I will say about electrical and computer engineering is brutal to get into that program. And so that's the only one that gets complicated here, because I've said you're applying into a college, but for electrical and computer engineering, as well as for some of those art majors, you're actually applying directly into a major. So you have to announce on your application if you are interested in electrical and computer engineering. And so the way they've got it set up when you apply to CMU is you have to declare your top 2 colleges you're interested in. And if they don't feel you match either one of those, then you're not going to get in. And they mostly look at your top one because they found some people just want to get in the school and they think they can change colleges. And then oftentimes that doesn't work. And then they're frustrated.
Right.
They have an 8-month co-op experience for people in the College of Engineering, especially for the electrical and computer engineering program. A lot of those students will do the 8-month co-op, and you can't do it until you've completed your sophomore year. So all these co-ops are so different at every school. They're just completely different. And there's places where co-ops, people prefer internships over co-ops, like in Atlanta, Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech has both co-ops and internships, and most people actually pick interns over co-ops because the way Georgia Tech's co-op is set up is you go to the same co-op every single semester for your whole 4 years. Where with internships, you could try 3 or 4 different ones. So they're all different. So when you hear co-op, I don't want you to think it's a one-size-fits-all. They're all very different. Theirs is an 8-month one you do after your sophomore year. Very, very industry-focused. Next, we have the Tepper School of Business, named after who, Dave? Tepper School of Business?
That's got to be, wait. David Tepper, he's the hedge fund manager of, is it Appaloosa?
Yep, good job. And he's also owner of, I think
one of the sports teams.
I think he owns Cam Newton. Well, Cam Newton was just traded.
Yeah.
But Charlotte, I think he owns Charlotte's football team.
Yeah.
What's the name of them? Cam Newton was on. I'm drawing a blank.
Not the it's not the Bobcats. It's not the Hornets.
No. We're having some senior moments, man. This is 2 weeks in a row. David Tepper School of Business, and overall business administration. It's not a school where there's a lot of times you see business schools and people are getting like accounting degrees and finance degrees and marketing degrees and management degrees. It's a standard business administration degree pretty much that everybody gets there with a well-rounded curriculum. Now, and the last school is the Heinz College of Information Systems and Public Policy. And so here you have a lot of different things, a lot of public policy, actually. You've got public policy and management. You've got healthcare public policy and management. You've got public management and a series of other majors. And so those are the different schools. They're Division III when it comes to sports. I'm almost done, Dave, but I want to take a breath and see if you have anything you want to say so far.
Well, very, very impressed that you can have an institution that's so high-powered in engineering and in drama. And in fact, I can tell you the only reason I knew it was so high-powered in drama was that I heard that Felicity Huffman's daughter eventually ended up getting in at Carnegie Mellon. And there was a piece that was comparing, saying that it's every bit as powerful as USC. So, and I was thinking at the time, man, drama in Pittsburgh? But there you have it. And of course, we know Carnegie Mellon was the big steel magnet. So it doesn't surprise me that it has all these electrical degrees. But it is still impressive that you have to pre-announce your major just to get into the institution. I mean, that's MIT levels right there. So
I was impressed that you knew that how selected the drama department was. I'm like, Dave, chalk one up, man. Showing your versatility.
That's right.
Showing your versatility.
I probably heard it from a tweet.
Oh, you're funny. All right. One criticism CMU has had is that it's too intense. And you'll hear this sometimes. And they're creating an environment that's not mentally healthy. And the administration has heard this concern, and they've done a number of things in the last 5 years to address that. They've created these meeting-free time periods. They've created this focus on mindfulness. They've increased their number of mental health counselors. And then, Dave, I thought of you when I thought of this next thing that they did.
What did they do?
What was one of Lauren's extracurriculars in high school that you loved, and she's not doing it right now?
Oh, the pet therapy?
Therapy dogs.
Oh, wow. I love it.
Once a week sessions with therapy dogs to help them tamp down the stress they bring to campus.
Oh, I love that. I love that. That's right.
You were hardcore. Dave was, our listeners don't know this, but Dave was all into therapy dogs. He was going, I don't know if you were going to conferences, but you got in an association, and you and Lauren were into that in Chicago in high school.
We did, and we still have the dogs. There was a wonderful, one day I walked in and I saw this woman going to each patient's room with these dogs, and coming from Chicago, I said, what are those? Are those drug sniffing dogs? And they were like, no, they're our therapy dogs. And there were these beautiful golden retrievers that would go around and calm the patients before doctors and nurses did horrible things to them, like stick them with needles and probe up all their parts of their body that shall not be named. So it was wonderful having the dogs there. I learned to love them at my work, and we got a couple, and we've been in the therapy dog program ever since.
There we go.
Yeah.
So the other thing they've done is they've added a very strong academic development department that provides tutoring. There's no stigma really at CMU when it comes to going for help. In fact, they'll be the first one to tell you. We have some classes where the entire class goes to academic development for additional assistance because it's just that rigorous. So everybody knows, get on over there and get you some one-on-one tutoring because you're going to need it. Founded by Andrew Carnegie, no surprise there. They've got some other nice things. They've got a semester in DC for people that want to pursue politics. And they've got some interesting traditions. And this one, I have to tell you this one tradition, Dave. So they have probably their most famous tradition is their Spring 4-Day Carnival Festival. So this is an entire event with food, festivities for 4 days, and the whole city of Pittsburgh not everybody, but the city of Pittsburgh participates. They invite Pittsburgh to come over. And they have two really famous events in addition to the food and the festivities at the carnival. One is building booths. And these are little houses that people make with electricity and running water. And they have competitions to see who can make the best house. So that's their booth competition. And then the second thing they're known for is their buggies. Now, this is when you know that Carnegie Mellon is not Michigan State. So this is what they do, Dave. They build a carbon fiber torpedo that acts as a baton for a relay race. A carbon fiber torpedo, and they do relay races with them. And that's their entertainment. Now, this is when I know I'm outside of my pay grade, okay? Because you know what fun was at Michigan State? What fun will be? Watching Imani Bates pass to Christie for a dunk and let the crowd go wild. By the way, Christie is the number one shooting guard in the country, and he just committed to us 2 days ago. He's from Chicago. So I'm a little hyped. That's fun. That was fun for me if I was a student, not making a carbon fiber torpedo and having a baton race. But I respect people highly that's their idea of fun.
And I just want to say, let's hear it for another Michigan State podcast bomb.
2 in a row.
Raining on Carnegie Mellon's parade. I'm into torpedoes. We don't want to hear about Imani Bates. We
got Christie this week. We got the number one shooting guard in the country. Right out of Chicago.
Well, I'd like to see Mr. Christie compete in that torpedo relay. I'd just like to say that.
The carbon fiber torpedo? That one?
That's right, man. I bet that Carnegie Mellon whoops Michigan State's butt with that one.
Well, I bet they have a higher average income if they're graduating people doing all that.
I agree.
You know? So another tradition they have is once a semester, they partner with the entire city and go in and do community service. There's an organization they partner with. It's called 1,000 something. I forget what it's called, 1,000 something. And they spearhead it and they go in and they, help kids in schools and hospitals. It's really, really great tradition. Now they do have some great pre-college programs if people are trying to figure out, is this the right environment for me? They've got a 6-week program and all kinds of things you can study, stay in the dorms, get that experience. They have a program that focuses on computational biology, all of their arts programs, the drama and the music, and the architecture and the art. I mean, all of their art programs have summer components to them. They have a game academy. You want to come in and learn gaming. They have a writing and culture academy, and then they have a summer academy for math and science. So that's what's going on in the summer. A little bit about some of the stats: 6,500 to 7,000 undergrads, around 7,700 to 7,800 grad students. Students come from 48 states and 50 countries. Application-wise, they accept the Common App. We already said they admit by college. They want 2 teacher recs, 2 recs, one a counselor rec, 1 teacher rec. You have to write 3 specific mini essays, and that counts for a lot. These are college-specific essays. They don't want anything else, though. They don't want resumes, no supplemental materials. ACT, SAT, extracurriculars are important. They offer an interview and they recommend it. It's not evaluative. And they've really made a big effort to decrease their emphasis on demonstrated interest recently. So anyone who has an early decision has demonstrated interest, whether they admit it or not. But they used to track whether you came to campus or track whether or not when you turned in a card at an info session. They don't do that anymore. For art majors, that's really about a 20% of the assessment is the academics and 80% is the addition, whereas for other majors, it's more like 50-50 off academics and everything else. They do still like subject tests. They're still one of the old relics hanging on saying, we like them. We're not requiring them, but we like them. 17% acceptance rate. 58% of people live on campus. Here's your racial demographic breakdown. Number 1 group would be Asian students at 38%. Second biggest would be Caucasian Americans, 33%. Then international students at 22%. Those are your 3 biggest groups. And then you get into 11% Latinx, 5% Black, 4.9% multiracial. Cost of attendance is $75,000, and they do not have merit money. So you gotta, you need to qualify for need base, or you're gonna have to suck it up and pay the big bucks. They do not give merit money. And they don't meet full demonstrated need either. So they're not one of the 77 schools that has the resources to do that. Lastly, I'll close you with the selectivity. So the acceptance rates are going to vary completely depending on what college you apply to. If you're applying to the College of Social Science and Humanities, there's a 24% acceptance rate. You're applying to the College of Engineering, there's a 17% acceptance rate. If you're applying to Information Systems, there's a 26% acceptance rate. If you're applying to the Melon College of Science, there's an 18% acceptance rate. If you're applying to the School of Computer Science, there's a 7% acceptance rate and even lower in certain instances. And then if you're applying to the Tepper School of Business, there's a 19% acceptance rate. And then when we talk about the schools within the College of Fine Arts, Architecture, 30%, School of Arts, 16%, School of Design, 7%, School of Music, 21%, School of Drama, 3%. And the last thing I'll let you know is that the average test scores they're very intimidating, to be honest. When you look at the math scores for most of these departments, the 25th to 75th percentile range for a lot of them, Dave, is 780 to 800.
Wow.
For quite a few of them. Yeah, that's true for 5 of their colleges. That's a 780 to 800 for engineering, for science, information systems, 750 to 800, Tepper Business, 770 to 800. And then they have another program, which I didn't talk about today, BXA, which is a unique program, 770 to 800. Now, on the evidence-based reading, it's a little lower, because this is such a math-generated school. But still, usually there, it's like low 700s.
Right.
So this is a place with very, very high testing. And that's Carnegie Mellon. Dave, any final comments?
Fantastic school. As impressive as I thought it would be on the science side, extremely unexpected to have such a strong drama department. and all within a great affordable city. So, wow, very impressive, Mark.
And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. Your College Bound Kid is produced by Dave Visaya of podcastengineers.com. If you find this podcast helpful, it would help us tremendously if you would subscribe and write us a review on your favorite podcast listening station. And please be sure to click the share button and send this to someone you know that can really use this information. The amazing music that you hear is by Victor Allen Weeks. Our image editor is Tauha Khan. Webmaster is Stalianos Dimitru. And marketing designs are by Kimberly Blass. And if you want to get a copy of the book, 171 Answers to the Most Asked College Admissions Questions, you can go right to 171answers.com. And if you want to have a college coaching session with Mark, you can send him a text to area code 404-664-4340. And if you have a question or a few questions that you would like to ask us, and we'll include them on the show, you can just email us at questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. Every week, we'll take one question and include it in the episode. We don't like your questions. We love your questions. So send them our way. And by the way, check out our website, yourcollegeboundkid.com. Again, we thank you for tuning in, and we look forward to meeting with you again next week.